Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Today we're going to be talking about, Bitcoin, Bitcoin dominance, the market conditions, and we're going to be monitoring things and possibly talking about some of the, final buying opportunities for those that missed it for the last few weeks. Look, I got to be honest, right? In terms of premium prices, you had, very nice opportunities for weeks, right? We had the big March crash, and on this channel, we did say what's going to happen and exactly played out. That you know, the 3 month candle was going to be the sell off candle, or the sell off, January, February, March was going to be the sell off quarterly candle. Now, did I think that was going to happen right away? No. But once we got new data, we readjusted and said, look, right, February, March are probably going to be continuation sells. And then, April, we said there's probably going to be a liquidity sweep and we're going to recover. And that is exactly what happened. I mean, look, this was pretty much the last relevant March candle over here, right? This was the last relevant March candle. It was a weekly, it was a daily, it was the monthly, and it was the quarterly, right? It was this quarterly. And we took it out. We took it out, we swept it, and then we instantly started to reverse, right? Big bullish structure, right? We went back into this order block. We closed very, very nicely, and then we just continued pushing on higher. Then we consolidated for roughly about a week, and we just fired up from there. Now look, we are past a very, very nice big zone, which we did talk about. That's going to be very, very, very important. Practically around the 92, 93K zone. If we go even to the weekly, we could see, multiple weeks of rejections, support, and resistance. We are above it right now. We do still have a couple of hours until it closes. Now, I will say anything above like a 91, 92K close is more than fine. Obviously, the higher we close, the better. But with that being said, it would not surprise me if we see a little bit of a retracement. Okay. So it doesn't mean it's going to, I don't think we're going to go back down to the 80s, right? There is a weekly candle over here, but given the context, right, the next thing we are looking for, the next relevant thing we are looking for is to just kind of respect and regain above 91, 92K consistently. So I do think there is going to be some type of pullback. If there's going to be a pullback, there's probably going to be a sweep of this, 91,730 zone, right? I can see a sweeping, maybe going down to like 90,500 and probably just chilling near this area if I'm being completely honest. It is looking pretty damn, bearish, right? Given the relevant structure. By bearish, I mean, it going probably back up into this candle over here, back down to 94,000 before it sells off, potentially to 3,000, right? That is personally what I see. I see, in the micro level, us going back up here, doing something like this next week, maybe Monday, Tuesday. I'm not sure how many days, but having a little bit of a liquidity sweep and then just overall, some type of consolidation and range is probably most likely what I could see this coin doing, well, Bitcoin doing, right? Because we did have a big pump, so some type of retest on the next weekly candle is just the most probable thing that I personally see. So, what does that mean? Well, ladies and gentlemen, you might be getting some discounts for certain coins, right? It could be literally for all the coins. So, we'll see. In general, let's just say do the top. We'll do the top 200, right? Things that have pumped, the last 7 days weekly. We can see many gains. Some coins have only pumped 20%. Some have pumped 50. Some have even pumped up to 100%, 90%, 160. So these coins, I don't think, depending on the context, I don't think you'll be getting the most insane premium prices you can get, weeks ago. It would not make sense. But, something like Turbo, it'll probably, if it does dip, maybe 20%. Same with meme coins will probably dip a little bit more. Something like, even like just choose a random coin like AKT. Like AKT pumped, right? But it didn't pump like some of these other coins so dramatically. So if we take it right now, it is currently up 18%. At one point, it was up 25. So, even if we take something like AKT, we might see AKT come back down to, if Bitcoin goes down like 3-4K, which is about 5%, we could see like AKT possibly come back somewhere into this zone, right? Which would mean AKT would be roughly like $1.11. So you might be getting like 8 to like 16% discounts depending on the coin on average. Don't expect the most premium prices for most coins, right? Something for like AKT for a drop to $1.12, like that's still pretty good. You're not really, missing out on anything. But other coins, something like Kaspa, you know, I really doubt it's gonna come back anything lower than like 8.5 cents, right? 8.5 cents is probably more or less going to be your prime, buying opportunity if we do go down. And that's even if we break this relevant structure, right? That is even if we break this relevant structure, because if Caspa itself is going to hold super strong despite Bitcoin, going down a couple thousand, then we might just kind of match Bitcoin and just do something like this, right? We kind of just chill around the 9 cents. So with certain coins, you cannot be too picky. I always say this, you don't literally need to snipe the bottoms. If you buy, let's say around 6 cents, 7, 8, 9, and even 10 cents. 10 cents already getting more premium for something like Caspa. But right, if 20 cents is the peak and you're buying 7.5, 8 cents or lower, you're still getting a great deal. Now, obviously, you want a premium, but I would say, overall, if you got into here, it's great. If you even get here, it's going to be good. Even here, right? Even here, anywhere, like in a couple of months, people are gonna be like, damn, Caspa was under 20 cents this for a year and a half practically, like, and I didn't buy it. People are gonna say, I wish I bought Caspa when it was under 20 cents. And look, obviously we want it cheaper, we want more money, but you cannot be that stingy, because the same thing for selling, right? You're most likely not going to sell the literal top. So do not expect, do not expect to, have buy the literal bottom if you're not going to sell the literal top. It's not a healthy mindset. You're going to put so much pressure on yourself, and at the end of the day, yes, if you made like 13x, it's like obviously fantastic. But I know deep down some of you are going to be like, oh, well, I could have made 15x. You still might not be satisfied. Or, if you saw 13x at one point and then your coin went to 15x, but you think you're going to go to 20x, and then, you might not, you might listen to the wrong people. Maybe you don't understand the charts, maybe you don't have the knowledge or whatever. And all of a sudden you go from 13x to 15x and back down to 11.5x, but you don't realize the context is actually we're reversing. Then depending on the person you are, you might cash out there, or you might say, "Oh, I'll take a 13x again. I'll take a 15x again," and then you just see your money and your profits diminish. And at one point, you're either gonna say, "Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna take the 7x. I don't care." You might be upset, but you're still like you might be like, "Oh, well, it's still money." Or you might just be that person that says, fuck, like fudge this, right? I'm not happy, and you just tank it. You just tank your profits, because I know some people do that, right? Just emotions. So, look, ladies and gentlemen, next week is going to probably be some type of pullback. So, if you do have FOMO about missing out, then, like I said, next week is going to be, in my opinion, the prime opportunity. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.